everybody. I'm Courtney, and I'm also known as Dearest Q on Instagram and Facebook. I do hand embroidery as well as some punch needle and needle felting. I love to create textures in my work as much as possible. I like using different types of methods to do this. I've been doing embroidery since university. I went to OCAD in Toronto. I'm now living in Philadelphia. I started doing embroidery because I was taught how to do it in classes, and I really found it to be a medium that I could do a lot with outside of the realm of the traditional embroidery, which usually consists of, flowers and monogrammed handkerchiefs and little framed pieces that you can put on your wall that are, kind of cottagey, which I love at the cottage. But I was more interested in creating something that I could display in my own home. Hello from Brazil. Everybody's just kind of stopping in right now, so I'm seeing everybody flood in on the side here. So basically I just wanted to create something that was a little more contemporary, and I saw a lot of stuff on Instagram that other artists were doing that I thought maybe I could elaborate on. I feel like it's important to find your own voice, and I feel like I was really looking to do that because I saw that a lot of people were already doing their own thing and doing a lot of plants and flowers. And I guess I kind of wanted to create something a little bit different. So usually I try to create works that kind of give off a mood. I usually do this through poses or colors, and they generally go with the season. So I'm really inspired by foliage and the different colors of the season. So right now I'm definitely into the brights because as I walk around the neighborhood, as I'm sure the rest of you are too, I am seeing a lot of beautiful bright flowers and, bright green grass and green leaves. So I've really been focusing on that in my work. Hi from Argentina and Peru. Hi. This is so exciting. Anyway, so I was actually, after I graduated from university, I was actually working in a restaurant. I was managing a restaurant in downtown Toronto, and I found it to be very stressful. So I was doing a lot of embroidering on my breaks or before work or after work as kind of a meditative activity that could get my mind off the stress of the day. And it definitely just turned into something more than that. I started sharing my work on Instagram and got a lot of great feedback from friends and family, and noticed that my following just, started to grow organically, which is when I figured out that I had something going on, and maybe I was starting to develop my own voice, which is really exciting. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to transfer patterns onto pre-made masks. So I have these you just plain cotton masks that I'm sure everybody has. I used actually this pattern here, so you can see the website that I got my mask pattern from. So these are really easy masks to make. I'm not amazing at sewing, and I was able to whip them up in a couple, maybe 10, 15 minutes with my sewing machine. And I guess I just found that, me and my husband were often, because I would make a few that are the same, and me and my husband would mix them up. So, sometimes it'd be like, oh, is this your mask or is this my mask? And I don't know. He's my husband, but I don't really want to share. Oh, my moms are here. That's exciting. But so I don't really want to share with my husband, even though, we share kisses and stuff. But so I decided that I would start embellishing my masks to make them more personal. And I found that maybe it was a little bit harder to transfer designs and to embroider than it was on my usual masks. So instead of having it in the hoop, you actually have to hold it in your hand while you're embroidering it, which can be a little bit difficult. But I'll show you guys how to do that in a bit. First, I guess I'll just talk a little bit more about my inspiration and how I choose colors and how I choose fabrics. So the fabrics that I like to choose are usually I usually choose Kona cotton, which you can find at craft stores. I also like buying, they sell these little kind of bundles of, of fat quarters, which are, you know, about a quarter of a meter of fabric or a yard of fabric. So they kind of just look like this. And I find these are perfect for embroidery because I don't really like buying big yardages, because I find that as trends change and as the seasons change, my color choices also change. So I don't like having a big bulk of the same fabric. So yeah, usually I'll just use these kind of quilting cottons, or I also like working on linen. Linen is nice because it has a nice texture to it. It's a little more, it's a little more textural, and I find the weave to be a bit looser, so it's easier to see. If you're going in a straight line, you can kind of follow the grid of the fabric. Some of my favorite colors, I obviously love working with different pinks. I'm very fond of, peachy pinks. I'll be showing you guys how to finish this mask that I already started. And it's kind of just like a peachy pink with some white and yellow. It's kind of inspired by Animal Crossing, which I've been playing a lot of, as I'm sure everybody else has as well. I just love all of the little flowers, and I don't know, I find them very happy and exciting. The colors I choose from, I use these, I have these bins, which I use to organize all of my embroidery threads, and they're like a bit of a mess right now, sorry. But I just try to keep everything kind of by color so that I can choose, very specifically what colors I want. I get these from craft stores. If I'm looking for something very specific, I'll go to a specialty needlepoint store in Philadelphia, where I'm actually living right now. There's a place called Rittenhouse Needlepoint, which I found to be a great resource for my work. Things that inspire me are, plants. I'm also inspired by, fashion that I see, or, I find that a lot of people are posting on Instagram kind of these romantic shots from Paris. So I follow a lot of women who are posting their outfits who are living in France. And I kind of will ask them, like, hey, do you mind if I use this photo to create a piece out of? And I'll change the colors, and I'll kind of tweak it to match the mood that I'm looking for. Sorry, I'm just trying to follow along with the questions that are coming in as I'm going along. So why don't we just jump into transferring onto fabric. So I'm just going to adjust my camera right now and show you how to do that. Okay. So I've got, this is just a light table that I bought off of, I think I bought this off of Amazon. You can find these very cheap. I think this was only about $10 or so. But you can also use your window if you don't have one of these. I just find it I find it very handy to transfer my patterns. I used to use my window, and while that was, just as good as this, I found it hard to be transferring my patterns while vertically. So I have these little flowers that I've drawn on paper, and to transfer onto your pre-made mask, all you have to do is put it under here, underneath your mask, and see how you can see right through it. So that is going to make it really easy. I have a few things that I like for transferring. I have these water erasable markers from Clover. They're blue, and you just put them underwater, your whole piece underwater when you're finished, and the blue just washes right out. But lately, I've been really into these. A lot of the embroidery girls are talking about them right now. They're very exciting. It's the Friction Pilot ball pen. So these actually just come out if you can draw on anything. So let's just draw. So you can see through here. You can just draw, and it looks like regular pen, and it works quite nicely. I find that the blue water erasable markers tend to dry out faster, and I also find it harder to see on, any blue fabrics, obviously, or darker fabrics. So that's how easy it is to transfer. See how it's just, there it is, ta-da. Another great way for transferring, if you say are using a darker fabric or a thicker fabric, is to actually use these. I cut this out of a bigger sheet, but it's a water soluble stabilizer. It's also good for making sure that your fabric is staying flat when you're actually embroidering. Because a big thing about not having a hoop is that it makes it harder to keep your fabric steady as you're working. So as you can see from this mask, I didn't use the stabilizer because I like stitching without it personally. I find that it can get a little bit sticky when I'm working. Oh, so someone's asking what this is. This is a light table. So it's basically just a flat little table that you can buy online, or you can buy at a craft store, and it's backlit, so you can see through, like it's like you have something over a window. It's also adjustable, so you can adjust it to be brighter or darker depending on what you're working on. So what I was saying was, if you use this, it'll make sure that you're not getting these kind of buckles in your fabric, but I don't really mind. I find that this stuff sometimes can make your needle sticky, or can be a little hard to create like flat satin stitches, which is what this is, and I'll be showing you that in a minute. But for this stuff, it's really easy because you can just take a regular, this is just a regular pen, and say, you want to make sure that you're using your own mask instead of, your partner's or your kids or whoever. So you can just put your initial on it. So here's my C. So I can just put that right on there and grab my mask. Or maybe I'll do it with this one, since I'm going to be showing you guys how to complete this mask. So this just peels right off from the backing. You just run your finger along it and it'll peel right off. And so it's sticky. So you gotta work fast. So this you can just put right here and you push it down. And now you have it transferred. And this will just wash out in warm water. So I'll just take this mask straight to my, bathroom sink or kitchen sink or whatever, and run this under hot water for a few minutes, and it'll come right out. I'll show you guys now how I stitch this. So what you'll want to do is grab some embroidery thread. I use DMC embroidery thread. It's my fave. It comes in this 6-strand. It comes in 6 strands. So you want to, because you don't always want to use all 6 strands, you'll want to, sorry, I have some pre-cut here. You'll want to separate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off a length with my scissors. And then to separate it, because it's in 6 strands, you'll want, and I only want to use 3, so I'm going to separate it. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're holding one strand, and so you grab one strand, you're holding the rest, and you can just pull the strand right out. You can only do that with one strand at a time. You can't do that with multiple strands. It'll get all knotted up. But this is the best way to do it, I found. So you just pull one strand out. Here we go. And then another one. And I'm down to 3 strands here. And I'll reuse these other strands that I've pulled out. Usually I'll just use those first, but you guys don't need to see me organizing my embroidery threads right now. I'm going to grab, I use these Clover embroidery needles. So they come in bigger sizes to small. I think it's 3 to 9 here. So I'm going to use, because I'm using 3 threads, I'm obviously not going to use the smallest one, and I'm not going to use the biggest one either. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle, and you just want to choose whatever one is most comfortable in your hand, and won't, and that the embroidery thread won't, stick into. You want to be able to pull the embroidery thread through easily. You don't want it sticking, and you also don't want your needle to be so big though that it catches on your fabric. So what I'm going to do, because you don't want to have knots at the back of this, because if you have knots at the back of your mask, you're going to have little threads sticking out, and then they're going to tickle your face while you're wearing your mask. So you don't want that. So what you're going to want to do is choose an area that's a little bit further away from your embroidery. Ooh, Tijuana, Mexico. Hola. So here you want to go in at some point away, and you're just going through one layer of the fabric. This is double layer mask, obviously. So I'm just going through one layer, and then I'm going to come out at the end of where I'm going to start stitching. So I don't know if you guys can see this. So it's coming out right here. And then I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm just going to pull it until it disappears into the back. Okay, so don't pull it anymore. And then you're just going to want to anchor it there. So just go in with a little stitch so that you just have it anchored now. So now you can start. I'm going to be using the stem stitch for this outline. I find it to be my favorite stitch for sure. I use it for all of my outlines. So what you want to do is you want to come out. Okay, and now it should be tight because you've anchored it, and you want to, because I'm making a C, I'm going to want to hold my thread up top here. So put your thread up, and then go down, and you're holding your thread. Here, let me move this a little bit lower so you guys can really see what I'm doing. So you're going to want to go down, and you're holding it up over. So now you have this little loop here, and then you just want to go back to the first stitch, come up where your first stitch went down, and you've created this, you're going to be creating, it's going to be kind of like a spiral. So see how this is kind of coming out here. So again, hold it up, put your needle in here, create the loop, and then go back to your last stitch, go back in, And then you just keep going like that. So it's pretty fast work. And see how I'm creating this kind of, it's kind of like a spiral. So you just keep going and you'll go all the way around. So create a loop. You always want to be holding your loop on one side and keeping it consistent. Otherwise, you won't get that spiral that you really want in this stitch. So it's going to keep showing you all the way around, loop. And this stitch, it's a little hard to get the hang of. I found when I started doing it, it was kind of messy and I wasn't really, kept switching sides, but now it's definitely just the stitch that I go to immediately for anything. It's so easy and it just creates like such a nice flat line. So we're going to go all the way around this, but I'm not going to show you because we're running out of time, because there's so many other things I want to show you guys. So I'm just going to end it here. But essentially, you're just going to do that all the way around. And then when you get to the end, you're going to go back under and you're going to do the same thing you did before. So I'm going to anchor it here. And then I'm going to go through one layer of fabric on the back. And then I'm going to come up. Okay. And then you just want to cut. So this little thread that's sticking out, if you just go like this, you just move your fabric around, it'll just disappear into your fabric. And that way you don't have any knots coming out, which is ideal in this situation. So I've already started this mask and I'm going to be showing you guys how I'm making these little daisies. And you already saw me transfer using the light table, or you can use a window to do this as well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using satin stitch, which is just a flat stitch. You go from one end to the other. It's really easy. So this is kind of, you know, the first stitch that you learn to fill in an area. For this, I'm going to be using 3 strands again. 3 strands is a good amount for filling in areas because it creates like a nice thick texture. If you use too few strands, you'll end up with a lot of open spaces. If you use too many, it can get kind of clumpy. And both of those situations you don't want. So it really depends on your fabric. If you're using a fabric with a looser weave, then you'll want more strands. Whereas if you're working with a tighter weave, you'll want less. So again, we're going to anchor our stitch underneath, and we're going to come out where we want to start. So I usually like starting in the middle of something like this. And I'll tell you why when I get going. A trick to making these, so a trick to making these is that you want to, because this area down here is smaller than, you know, this whole area that you're going to need to fill with stitches. Some of you're going to have more stitches on the top than you are on the top of the petal than you are on the bottom. So you're going to go up. See how I'm only going halfway here. So I'm going to do a couple of these to kind of create the lines that I'm going to follow as I stitch along. They're kind of just guidelines so that when I get to them, I'll know the directionality that I'll need to go for the petal. So just do a couple of those up, and then you want to make sure you're getting as close to the edge of your petal as you can. If you are using the water soluble or heat soluble pen like I am, it doesn't really matter if you're covering up these lines. You just want to get as close as possible. But if you're using a pencil or a regular pen, you're going to want to make sure that you're covering these lines completely, because they won't necessarily wash out depending on the pen or pencil that you're using. So be mindful of any spots that are showing from your pen. So now we're just going to start at the bottom. We're going to start really filling it in. So we're going to start at the bottom of the petal here. And we're going to want to come up and then just come back into the top. And you want to try to keep your thread as flat as possible. And what I'm doing with my hands right now, you can't really see, but I'm holding it. I'm holding it with 2 fingers underneath and then holding it here as well, and kind of pulling it taut with my fingers, because I don't have my hoop, but I don't want my fabric to move around at the same time. So we're just going to be filling it from the bottom to the top, moving around as we go, filling in the petal. And this shouldn't take you very long at all. You should be able to have this done in a few minutes, each petal. And I just kind of go randomly, not necessarily following like a specific plan. Sometimes I'll go, from left to right or something. But for this one, I'm just kind of being a little bit free because I'm not using my stand. I think that having a stand is important for embroidery. If you are really getting into embroidery, I would definitely recommend getting a stand. I found that a few years after starting with embroidery, my wrists started to hurt a lot. So I would definitely recommend it. But we're almost done here. I'm just going in and out from bottom to top, trying to keep my tension even, trying to make sure I'm not pulling too tight, trying to make sure that my thread isn't twisting. If your thread does start twisting, you can just hold it and try to, smooth out any twists in your fabric. Da-da-da. So we're just going to keep going along until we have the whole petal filled in, going from bottom to top. So to start the second one, we're just going to do the same thing, just starting from the bottom, going to the top. Okay. And then maybe doing some of these little ones, going halfway to try to create the shape before we really start filling it in. Satin stitch is really easy, but it can also be hard to get it flat, especially if you're not using a hoop. So I'm really not taking my time right now, but when you're doing this, take your time. I like to do this kind of work outside because I don't have to use my stand. So you can kind of take this work everywhere you go. So I'm running out of thread. So what I'm going to want to do is the same thing I did before. I'm just going to kind of anchor it through one layer of fabric like that. and then go back under and do the same thing where I'm going through one layer of fabric and pulling it out. And then I'm cutting it so that you don't have any knots. Ta-da! Okay, I'm not going to get another thread for this because I want to make sure that I show you guys everything. So I'm going to go back to my 3 strands of yellow thread here, and I'm going to show you how to make a French knot. So these are just a bunch of little French knots here. So what you want to do is take your 3 strands again, and you're going to want to thread your needle like so, and then go to the back, and you're going to want to anchor again. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go in here. And pull through before coming up in the front of my work. Okay, so to make a French knot, you want to make sure, so you have it pulled tight here, you get your needle, and you want to, as close to the surface of your thread as you can, you want to loop it 2, 3 times and put your needle back in, holding the knot that you're creating with your other hand that's not on your needle. So you don't want to pull that too tight, because if you pull it too tight, you won't be able to get your needle through. So you can just pull through here, holding it, you know, firm, but not too tight. And now you have a little French knot. It's so easy. I remember seeing these and thinking they were so cool and they must be so difficult, but they're actually just little knots. So again, coming out here, wrapping 1, 2, 3, and putting my needle back down, holding my thread taut. And for this one, it doesn't really matter if you're holding your fabric taut, because you're not connecting, you're not pulling any thread or any fabric together. This is just going, it's just going up and then coming down, not in the same hole as you came up in, but maybe a couple of threads over. So again, wrapping 3 times and going back down. So as you can see, this is going quite quickly. I only have the 3 little knots, but you don't need that many. This is a very small flower. So going back down. I find that when I'm learning new embroidery techniques, I always find it hard to do something if I can't actually see it being done. So I've actually used YouTube a lot when I'm learning new techniques. It's a really good resource for different types of stitches and textures you can make. Okay, almost done. See how fast this is? So once you get, this is another one that the first couple you make might just end up with, you know, things a little more naughty than you anticipated. But, you know, with everything in embroidery, it really is a practice makes perfect situation. So the more you practice something, the better you'll get at it. I get a lot of questions on my Instagram from people wanting to know how to do certain things and how to get better. And it really just comes down to practice for sure. So here we go. We've got all of our little French knots and we're ready to, again, anchor in the back. So going in under somewhere and just making sure you're only going under the one layer of fabric and not catching on the other side, which can be kind of difficult, especially if you get into this kind of tight area. So as you can see, I'm kind of catching the other side of the fabric right now. So it's almost better to look at it from this side. And then you're coming up, pulling out, and then snipping. So at the end, you'll end up with these cute little daisies, and you'll have your little monogram, and you'll know that this is your mask. As you can see, I'm also doing this outline here, and this is just kind of, it's a kind of blanket stitch, and I've done another one here. So I'll show you a little bit of blanket stitch when I show you guys how I made this. So this, I just decided I wanted something more floral. And this one's really easy because a lot of people like doing these little leaves here. Okay, so what we're going to do for this one is we are just going to be finishing some of this stuff here using the stem stitch again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my thread. Again, I'm going to grab 3 strands. And you'll end up with 3 here. Sometimes when you're doing this, the ends can get kind of knotted up a little bit, but that's okay. You just kind of have to like pull them until they come free. So I think what I'm going to show you how to do for this one is I'm going to show you how I'm doing my edge. So I'm going to be using this green that I'm using in here to finish the edge here. So I've got 3 strands. You can use 4 strands if you want it to be a bit more more obvious. Maybe I will use 4 strands. So I'm just going to add another strand to this because I like the idea of a thicker edge. This is also how I finish the backs of my hoops. Let me just grab one. I'll show you guys. So this is a new technique I've been working on before I get back into showing you guys the mask tutorial. I'm just going to show you this. So this is something new I've been working on using my needle felter, using the needle felting technique with my merino roving to try to create this like this 3D flower. Again, this is the French knots here that I was doing before. So for the back of my hoop, what I like to do is cut out a piece of felt and do a blanket stitch around. For the edging of my hoops, I like to use, I have this jar of all of my ends of threads, and this is kind of just full of, you know, whatever kinds of threads are left over from embroidery projects. So I like to incorporate them into the backs of my hoops instead of throwing them out or, you know, sucking them up with a vacuum. I find it creates this fun, you know, multicolored look on the back. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the same technique with our mask. So for most masks, you want to finish the edges as you're as you're going. You want to finish this after you've sewn it. But what I did was I left it open. So there's a little pocket here. And what I'm going to do is I am actually going to use a knot. So I'm going to tie. What I like to do is you hold your threads in one hand and then loop it around like you're creating a French knot. So 3 or 4 times, and then hold it by the little loop that you've created, and just keep holding that, and pull your thread through, and just keep pulling, and it'll create a little knot at the end, so that you don't have to just keep knotting multiple times. This is just, it's so easy. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to come out. So you're going in under the edge and you're coming out in between the 2 layers of fabric. And you're just going to be doing, I'm just going to be doing a plain blanket stitch. It's the easiest. There are different variations of the blanket stitch. This is the Antwerp stitch, which is, or Antwerp edging, which is, it kind of has a little knot on it as you're going along. So I'm just going to be doing a plain blanket stitch though, just to show you guys. So you have it coming out here, have your threads coming out. So you're going to want to go under and have your thread behind your needle. And see how I'm creating kind of like a little loop, because you're coming up in front of the loop you're making. So again, so you're up and then you're just going right back down here. And again, loop your thread behind your needle and pull up. And this is a great, easy way to put a decorative edge on anything. Again, this is what I use to back my hoops. It's very easy. Anybody can do it. Pulling taut, and trying to keep it so that the amount of space that you're leaving against the edge is relatively even to make it look finished and neat. So just keep going all the way around, putting your thread behind your needle and pulling up. Okay. When you're going around the elastics, it can get kind of messy, but that's okay. Again, in, coming out. Ta-da. So as you can see, this is creating a nice, easy decorative edge for your piece. When you're at the corner, because you need to be coming, you're going to be going, when you're going around the corner, you want to try to create your next stitch a little closer. If you have to, then you might need to, because you don't want things to get warped as you're going around the corner. You want it to be smooth. You want to make sure that this line is going around the corner. So if you're keeping your stitches nice and close together, it should create a smooth outline as you go along. fell out of my needle. That usually means that it's almost time to switch to a new thread. I try to go as far as I can. So as you can see, my thread has kind of gotten a little threadbare. As you're stitching, if you find that your threads are getting a little frayed or are a little threadbare or a little uneven, just cut them off. They can also, I usually cut them off like as I go through the process, because if you have the ends of your threads getting threadbare or getting uneven, they can knot up and cause your thread to kind of get a knot in itself as you're trying to pull it through. So what we're going to do is we're just going to thread our needle. It should be easy to, I know it can be hard to thread a needle, but it should be relatively easy. If you're finding it too hard to get your threads through your needle, you're probably using a needle that's too small. And if you find that your threads are floating in your needle too much, then you're probably using a needle that's too big. So you kind of want to have like a bit of tension. You want to be able to feel the threads when you're pulling, but you don't want it to be too tight. You just want to have a little bit of tension. So for this method, you don't want to get too close to the edge of or to the end of your thread, because it can be hard to pull it back through, because you're going to have to go here. I'll show you how. So this only went this far, but I would grab another thread and start going all the way around. But to finish, what I like to do is just go back under and maybe grab a little tidbit of the fabric underneath and just kind of do that anchor stitch that I've done before, and just try to make sure that I'm grabbing a little bit of the fabric, grabbing the thread, creating this little knot. You don't want the knot to be too big because you don't want it to stand out too much, but you also want it to be sturdy so that you can put these masks in the washing machine. You can definitely put hand embroidered masks in the washing machine. You shouldn't have a problem with it if you've anchored all your stitches and you have, done everything right. It shouldn't be a problem. So again, I pulled it through the back here. If you do want to preserve your hand stitched masks for as long as possible, it could be a good idea to wear like a disposable mask underneath instead of using this on its own. And also if you find that maybe the embroidery on the back bothers you, but I've been wearing these hand embroidered masks and I find them to be pretty comfortable, actually. I thought maybe I would be bothered by the threads in the back, but because we're pulling our threads through and anchoring them, it's not, those knots and those little threads sticking out just aren't there to bug me. So that's fantastic. If you guys have any questions for me, I am definitely down to answer them. If there's any stitches you want to know, I do have this kind of blank mask with some circles drawn on it. I was thinking about just adding some random stitches to see how they look. So if there's anything you guys are interested in learning about, please let me know. Right now, I'm just going to show you guys how another way that you could outline your piece. So again, I'm going to break this down so that I'm only using 3 strands. Okay, so I've got my 3 strands here, and I'm gonna do a little chain stitch, which is one of my favorite decorative stitches to use. Again, it's very easy once you get the hang of it. It's not an advanced stitch at all. Can't find my needle. There it is. Oh, my favorite stitch. Absolutely. So I'm going to show you guys the chain stitch, which is my favorite decorative stitch. I've used it. I use it a lot. I actually have been using it in the outline of these new pieces. I find that it really creates an interesting braided edge. So it's kind of my new favorite stitch. So what you want to do for the chain stitch is you're going to want to, we're not going to bother anchoring because it's too time consuming right now. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to come up here. You're going to want to create a loop. So you're going to want to come back down through the same spot that you just came up. Okay. And you're holding the stitch, this loop the entire time. And so now we have this loop. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go maybe 2 millimeters ahead and bring our needle back up. So you're going through this loop here. You've got this little loop and you're going to be coming back up through. And as you pull, it should create this little loop. So we're going back down again, right where we came up. And again, pulling the loop while holding it, coming up a few millimeters away, and making a little loop. And so this ends up kind of looking like a braid at the end, which is very beautiful. There are different variations of chain stitch as well that you can do. I have this great book that I love. What is it? Let's see. I have a book, I think it's called Embroidery Stitch by Stitch, and it has a lot of different types of surface embellishments that you can add to things. It also goes through a lot of different types of techniques you can do for embroidery or needlepoint. There are just so many different stitches to use. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but once you find your favorites, then usually you just stick with them. I do find it hard. Sometimes I have to force myself to learn new stitches because I'm so comfortable with the ones that I know. Okay, so there's our chain stitch. I think I'm just going to pull my camera back up and give you guys and let you guys know about what's going to be coming up for me with Domestika. Hi guys, sorry about that. Oof. Hi guys, sorry about that. I just wanted to check in and let you know about the video that I'll be doing for Domestika in the fall. I'm really excited to be showing some new techniques that I've learned over the past little while. I'll be showing you guys a little bit more about needle felting. I'll also be showing you guys how I create my figurative pieces. Like this. So it's going to be very similar to this kind of style. I'll be showing you guys how I create these super clean outlines and how I use needle felting to embellish a piece with extra texture. I feel like texture is one of the most important things that I use in my practice, and it's something that I like to experiment with as much as possible. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm really excited to share more with you guys about what I'm doing with my work, and I'm really excited to teach you guys more about my practice and what I do on a daily basis and showing you guys how you can do it too. So thanks so much for joining me, guys, and have a great day.
La idea es como algo muy frágil.
Se me fue la hebra.
I'm going to show you some examples. This is what we've got behind me.
¿Qué más preguntas tengo por aquí? ¿Cómo descubriste que lo tuyo era la idea?